Hi everyone, I'm glad you could make it. My name is Alina, I am a sleep coach, and this is my Sleep Talks channel. Today's topic was inspired by one of the comments that I received on a video that I made with Coach Daniel and Coach Michelle on the Sleep Coach School YouTube channel. It was an episode about the sandstorm. The concept of a sandstorm is in a way some sort of like a speed bump that happens on like during the process of recovery. And basically what happened is that kind of like that episode or that concept triggered some fearful response in a person. And this is something not really like the first thing that I heard of. I also recently had a video about hyper awareness. Maybe you remember this episode when I was talking about self-monitoring, and there was also like a person who commented that they actually never heard of that kind of like thing that can happen, and now they're afraid of it. So I generally see this kind of tendency that when we get some new information, and that information can trigger us, and we can start feeling more afraid, and we start having some sleep troubles. And I find it really common. I also experienced it in my insomnia recovery journey, so I just wanted to share my thoughts here and explain why it happens in the first place, and also how we can overcome this. But before we begin, I have two things to say. The first one is the general disclaimer that I'm not a medical doctor, so this is not any sort of professional medical advice. And the second thing, this is something new that I just created. I started my Patreon page, which basically gives you an opportunity to support what I do. It's basically like monthly donations that you can select, and this way support my channel or my Instagram page or anything that I do with intent to help you get over insomnia. So if you feel like giving some extra appreciation, I would really love that. I will put the link to my Patreon page in the description. And having said that, let's get to the main topic of the video. So basically, these kind of things I noticed that happen not only like on like educational videos, but also you might remember yourself having something similar when you opened, let's say, some insomnia forums, or you went to insomnia groups and people there start explaining their experiences with insomnia, and they might describe something that you've never experienced before, and then you kind of start feeling more afraid of that happening to you. And this is like paradoxically, then you start noticing this thing. So for example, like person can say that they haven't slept for 4 days straight without like zero sleep, and if you've never experienced that, then you might try it on yourself to see if this is possible, if there is such a possibility of that happening to you. And then if the brain decides like, oh my god, yes, probably you're going, or you could be possibly having this kind of experience, then you start being more triggered, more afraid. And ironically, this is something that you finally get to experience. And this is not something that you kind of like brought a curse on yourself or something. It's simple, basically it's a basic way how our brain protects us, and there is nothing new about it. While it is kind of tempting to try to avoid this kind of information, like many people resort to avoidance techniques where they just try to not read anything anymore. It's nothing that could trigger them. But again, the problem is not that those things exist, because there can be thousands or like millions of things that can trigger you, and we don't really have control over them. one day someone can tell you something and that might, upset you or kind of like trigger you, but you don't really have control over what others do or what you find on the internet or somewhere else. So it's not really realistic to kind of like isolate yourself from that. So the problem that it's not in the fact that it exists. The problem is that you want to avoid it, because this kind of avoidance is something that tells the brain that, okay, be careful, there is a threat, like protect your sleep. And this is when you try harder, and the more we try, the more anxious we become and less we sleep. So this is basically how the process goes. And I would say the point of of the whole teaching here is like to explain you that there might be on your way some things that you read or hear or whatever. Someone can tell you something that might trigger something. And when we understand why that happens, we can basically become immune to that. Or we can actually help ourselves to process it faster. So let's see how the whole thing works. Like, why do we react the way we react to some new information that we read? So basically, it all comes down to the way how our brain generally works. So that's the like normal brain, like of a person that doesn't particularly have to have any like insomnia. So we normally pay more attention to things that are new, that are somehow odd, weird, unexpected, unknown, and we can easily test that. Or just imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room reading something, and then you suddenly hear some noise. So that noise kind of stands out from the whole environment that you've been in, and this noise is something like new, something like you don't know what it is, where it comes from, and unintentionally your brain starts paying attention to that. So whatever you've been doing before, you kind of switch your attention to that new thing. And this is absolutely normal, that the brain is always kind of on alert for any possible like danger or something that we need to pay attention to. But brain during insomnia, which is basically brain that has learned to fear sleeplessness, there's no physical difference in that, but it's just the brain that kind of learned to fear not sleeping. It is extra sensitive to anything new. So on top of that, the fact that the brain not naturally pays attention to something like new or odd or weird, it is more sensitive when we are also scared of losing sleep. So, and this is why it kind of like triggers, because if the new thing brings potential threat and the brain quickly tries to kind of evaluate that, if the new information actually carries threat to your sleep, this is when it can like trigger. So just understanding that that your brain is currently like more sensitive to something new, it is completely normal, and this kind of realization can help you look at things a little bit from a different perspective. So and while it is impossible to avoid this, we cannot really like forever avoid anything that can upset us or trigger us. We can just remind ourselves that whatever is new, sooner or later it becomes old, it becomes familiar. And this is when our brain with when we get exposed to that new thing over and over and over, our brain gets desensitized to that. That means that things that have been triggering before will be triggering for some time. But after that, when the brain sees that actually, even though that thing happened, even though that you felt hyper aroused, you're still safe, nothing bad really happened to you, this is when the brain stops thinking of this kind of new information or new thought as something like weird, odd, unwanted. It starts considering as something old, something like not interesting, and this is when you stop being sensitive to that. And basically considering anything that is feels like new, that something that is like really normal can help to turn off gradually that kind of like response. And if you think about that, like this kind of like line of thought that happens when we expose ourselves to some new information, and it triggers us. Let's say you read something about, let's say, hyper awareness, right? And you have never had it, and now you say like, what is that? This is so weird. Have I ever had that? Maybe I will have it this this night. So you become like extra vigilant yourself, and then you start noticing that you're having that. Now you become afraid of that, and the thought that might appear could be, what if I will have that? What if I will experience that? And naturally, this, like, we want to kind of avoid that. But if you think of that thought, like what if thought, it's exactly same what if thought as you might probably had before. For example, what if I will not sleep tonight? What if I will be tired the next day? What if this? What if that? So it's just the same old process. It's just the object of that fear is new. So our task here is to show the brain that everything new isn't really new. It's just the way how our brain reacts to that, and this reaction can happen for some time until it becomes non-sensitive to that. And this kind of awareness can help us be more accepting, welcome this kind of like anything that new that can happen. And when we are not resisting, when we welcome feeling, when we welcome a possibility of something like anything that might potentially like trigger us, but we take it with without any kind of desire to avoid it. This is when the whole problem stops existing, because we no longer resist it, and this is when we stop really even like getting triggered in the first place. But it takes time to get there. And if now, if something you find triggering, or let's say you read something on the forum, or you read some article and it said something, and then you kind of like start thinking about it, just bring your awareness to that thinking process that's happening right now. Is it the same, this safety mechanism that's been with you since the beginning when insomnia started? Because the topic and the object might change, but the process is still the same. It's still just the brain trying to protect you. So I hope that I brought some clarity into this question. And of course, if you have any follow-ups, feel free to write me in comments. I would really like to know what you think about that. And thanks for watching and listening this episode. I hope you liked it, and I will see you soon. Bye.